Dr. Nicole LePera is a clinical psychologist and owner of the Holistic Psychologist. We chat about the 3 core human needs, the subtle ways people compensate for not having those needs met, and the steps that anyone can take to feel more authentically confident and connected to their true self. First question that I wanted to chat with you about was the needs of the spirit or soul, as you talk about it. I feel like when I thought about personal needs, and I think many people think about needs, they're aware of like food, water, shelter, perhaps even a sense of belonging. But you outlined 3, which are to be seen, to be heard, and to express oneself authentically. And I'd like to dive into those. But the first thing that I notice is that I think most people do not identify a deficiency of those things in their lives, even if there may have been a tremendous deficiency. So I'm curious if you could just sort of unpack what these things are, why they're so important, and how come people don't realize the lack of them.
Yeah, I think really generally, and then I could dive into a little bit more specific, I think I often describe us as, like the horse with blinders on it. We've become so familiar with, just to use my language, our very habitual, conditioned, familiar way of being. And for many of us, then, to speak to your point, it doesn't include an expression of the deeper sense of self. For some of us, it doesn't really even include tending to emotional needs, and really more of a focus on the physical. So on the surface level, we only have become familiar and habituated and used to ourself in one way. So even asking those questions for a lot of us doesn't occur to us. And I think for very many reasons passed through generations is because, I was even raised by older parents who my dad is now upwards. He's 86 years old. And contextually across generations, there was even in the psychological field, as wild as this might be to say, there wasn't much talk of emotional needs. There really was this focus on, like you're saying, the physical body. I know like certain things I have to do. And again, I think without that awareness, and as always, I will break kind of change, transformation, actualizing ourselves into 2 steps without understanding or knowing really simplistically that we have this deeper self that desires to be seen, to be heard, to be expressed, to be understood. I could take it a step further, to be authentic in a relationship and connect it safely with others, regardless of what that expression is. Without that awareness, we then are unable to even make choices to reconnect with that space. And again, for reasons then, if we want to continue into this need conversation, much like Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, I actually adapted one in my past workbook. I put out How to Meet Yourself, calling it the Authentic Needs Pyramid, which just honors that reality. Unless we're safely grounded and our body is sending those signals of safety to our mind, our body plays a big role in terms of how we can even navigate our emotional needs, right? So putting our physical needs at the foundation, the need for nutrients, the need for oxygen, the need for water, the need for rest and movement, restorative sleep. Then we're not going to be capable of navigating our emotional needs to be self-expressed. We're emotional beings, and to be safely connected and supported by others in that emotional self-expression, then we're definitely not going to be able to be safe enough to drop into what our deepest desires are, what we want to say, express. And I think we really want to detail those further, our inherent creativity, our inherent imagination. And those, I think, are our drives that, again, we don't know we have, and we don't maybe have the tools to express, even if we have an idea of this concept of self-actualizing, or I know for your work, self-improvement and reaching kind of those places. We're not equipped physiologically really to do that.
It seems like it's almost a gift of life that you're unaware of those things of which were not met, but it also can become an obstacle. As you mentioned the word safety. When I think of my upbringing and, my middle class type of upbringing, everyone around me, I was safe. I was very safe. I lived in a neighborhood and nobody ever came and assaulted me. And I think it's been tough for me to sink into the truth of some of the ways in which I was emotionally unsafe in what everyone around me and me deeply believed was like the pinnacle of a loving circumstance. So I see it both as this gift of growing, which is like, everything's perfect, but also it does block you from understanding the ways in which you're not totally authentic, or you're incapable of even recognizing that you're not being totally authentic, which has been a struggle for me, and I think for everybody, is whether it comes through therapy, breath work, meditation, something, an acknowledgement of a pain that might be 20, 30 years old in my case, that you just had no idea about. And that's something that has been just consistently startling to me, and I appreciate about your work because it gives clues as to, where might you begin to find these things that you're only partially aware of. So I was wondering, maybe we can begin to dive into ways in which, what is a clue that maybe someone hasn't been seen or heard or isn't able to express themselves authentically, even if they don't immediately identify those things as having been not fully met in their lives?
Yeah, very, very similar to you. I had a narrative of, I had a healthy, close, happy, connected family, only to come to realize, and again, it wasn't a moment of realization. For me, it was a moment of noticing the lack of self. And what I mean by that was, I very rarely in my relationships, in my life, in all of these pattern ways, I got very good at kind of showing up, right? Knowing myself in one context. And for me, that was through achievement, through, being successful, checking the boxes, having the relationship, showing up within what I thought was being a good, partner, daughter, or sister, or whatever it was. And what I came to realize when, of course, I wasn't feeling fulfilled and connected to the life that I created that I thought was going to, translate to those feelings, I saw how on few occasions I actually paused to check in with me. So I think that for a lot of us, again, the awareness begins by exploring, like, am I actually, to self-express to someone else, to be seen, heard, and understood, right? And this might sound really simplistic. That assumes that we have that degree of connection with ourselves, that we take a moment to pause and say, well, what do I want if it's around our physical body? What does my body need right now? What do I need to express emotionally? What's going on for me? Am I even connected to those physiological shifts and changes? Because that's what emotions are that originate in my body. So without that, and I used to, think I was doing all of that and left feeling emotionally disconnected in my relationships. I had no other, option, but I thought it was the person's problem, right? You're not connecting to me emotionally. Only to realize when I really hit pause and was like, okay, why are you, suffering the way you are? Why does not this life feel good for you? I saw that I actually didn't know what I wanted. I didn't really understand my emotions. I really wasn't seeing myself, expressing myself to myself, all of that, again, based in safety. I love how you beautifully bring this in, because in childhood, without that emotional connection, I did have physically present parents who were attentive to me in certain instances and occasions, though when it came to navigating the rest of my emotional world, there was little room for anything outside of stress and worry. In my home, with a lot of chronic health issues and a lot of health crises, that was our only emotional language. So the reality of it is, and I think our first marker, if we want to feel something reflected back in us, whether it's in a relationship or the world, we want to feel seen, heard, and expressed, then we really have to see, do I have that connection? Do I know what I want to say, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling? Can I express it in a way that's safe for those around me? And I think the large majority of us, and we feel shameful, I think, when the answer is no. Or when we do know, though for conditioned reasons, often, again, based in safety, because I've learned not to share what my real thoughts are because I get told, stop being so dramatic. Right? Or I've learned to gain safety because I've had to show up in service of someone else or monitoring their moods because I have an explosive parent, or like me, a detached parent. So I had to become attuned to when they were available and when they weren't. So I might instinctually, know what my truth is in terms of this authentic, deeper self, but I might be censoring or overriding it because that's the only way I've learned to create safe, somewhat safe, I'm obviously putting my ears, connections in my childhood, because that's the reality of it. We all become so familiar with what we've learned about ourselves, with our narratives, with the way of being in childhood, and we continue to repeat that. Not only because it's hardwired, because that gives us that false sense of safety.
I think at this point it's important. You and I, it sounds like, are very much on the same page. But for those in the audience, I find it's often very important to take time and be like, this is not to drag your parents down. This is because there is such, I think it's probably a near universal child thing to protect the form of love that one received as a child. And that can take a lot of forms. It can be an aggressive defense that is, no, that's not what it's like. But it can also look like you're listening to this and just go, that's not me. This doesn't apply to me. And I just want to flag that as, listen, let's talk about some of the clues that some of those things might have been there. And none of this is to say that your parents weren't wonderful, didn't do the best that they could, didn't do better than their parents did for them. And that luckily, it does seem that collectively, we're able to offer each generation perhaps a little bit more than we got. And in doing that, that is not to drag down what the prior generation did. It is to help you give even more to your children and to yourself today. Because I know that it can feel like, oh my God, I'm attacking my mother, I'm attacking my father. And that's just wrong when we talk about these sort of topics.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that is kind of wired into us instinctually. I mean, these are the humans upon which we were completely dependent in our childhood for all of our needs, right? And again, I think there's cultural messaging and a lot that gets kind of entangled in there that I think a byproduct though of, and the reason why I'm always describing the, underlying neurophysiology or the nervous system, kind of all of the stuff, and to speak to your point, even societally, there was information that, like I was sharing, this idea of emotional needs, right? That wasn't a conversation. There's a societal evolution in the information that's shared and the resources that the generations that came before us have had access to. Though a big part of the healing journey in that kind of first step of awareness, I think when we have a new way of understanding why we're struggling, and just focusing on the self first, right? Kind of if we have new language to the reason we're stuck is because, again, we're wired this way. This is the only way we've learned to gain safety. Now we can be more compassionate to our own experience. And I think a byproduct of healing, then we extend that. We have a greater ability then to extend that compassion to our empathy, right? To our parents. We're able to pull back, even for those of us who, and just to play another scenario back, who have parents who have greatly caused, trauma and harm, and we don't even want to think and we don't even care to be compassionate toward them, right? I think we can expand and kind of have a different level of understanding with why certain things happened or certain things didn't happen, whatever the case was for each of us.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about that seen, heard, authentic expression and some of the subtle ways that I think broadly it was not really available 10, 20, 30 years ago. So you gave a really great example of a well-meaning parent, and probably something that I've done in a lot of people, which is a kid comes home from first day of school and says, "Mom, I'm so sad. I don't have any friends. Nobody sat with me." And they say, "Don't worry about it. It's the first day of school. It'll get better." And that is a broader pattern of not creating space for the seriousness of a child's reality of pain, suffering, and exclusion in a rush to solve that problem by so quickly moving them away from pain. And the patterning that can create, that I know that I experienced, was one of, whenever you experience an uncomfortable emotion, rather than take it to these people who can harbor it, hold it, create space for it, solve it. And that's a wonderful skill to have. That's a wonderful skill to have. I'm going to go make the friend. Yeah. But it has its limits. And then there are things that can't be snap solved that are now not even registering consciously. And there are problems that lingered in my life for 20 years that I was unconscious of, subterraneanly ruining relationships and making me feel uncomfortable in all sorts of ways that I wasn't even aware of. So I'd love to, if you could just dive into more examples of these subtle ways that well-meaning parents culturally might have just done things that made their children feel unseen, unheard, and unable to express themselves authentically.
Yeah, and I think, that comes from a lot of us, even parents, we kind of project from our own experience, right? So when we hear a child, kind of share something, we can minimize, like you're saying, the exclusion, the isolation, what was happening. really simply kind of we're speaking from our mature adult perspective, where we've weathered that on occasions and we either can relate or can't relate, and it does get better. We've lived enough repetitions of that happening, right? We have to, though, remember, and this I think we struggle with outside of even relationships with children. I see us as adults, and myself included, struggle in other relationships with adults because we struggle to separate our experience and to create space for a different experience, whether it's developmentally different or just because they're a unique, diverse, individually different, right? We do have that natural tendency to kind of color things as it is for us. And then a deeper, I think, thing that happens, and again, there's many different versions of, when parents can be speaking from their much more matured lived experience perspective that can feel very invalidating. Because that's what it feels like for the child, emotionally invalidating. You're telling me that what is feeling and is so big in my world, right, isn't that big. And it also, I think comes out and around, or what triggers it, I should say, or what activates it really at the core is the parent, quite literally in that moment, is feeling a discomfort themselves, whether it's because it's activating all of the times where they were isolated and alone, left at school, maybe the exact same experience that the child is sharing, right? Or it's triggering a normal, compassionate discomfort when someone you love is upset. And again, this applies to a lot of relationships, even to adulthood that we do. So the reason we go into problem-solving mode is oftentimes to relieve both of us, right? If we solve the problem, neither of us have to be uncomfortable in that moment.
Yeah.
So again, that's another kind of form of invalidation. And there's other scenarios outside of, what's happening to us being minimized, sometimes within the relationship, right? With a parent. And again, another well-meaning example I do want to give that often happens, again, as a byproduct of a parent's childhood, right? So say they've had a childhood where their parents were physically or emotionally not present. So now they're going to be really present, almost what I would describe like a helicopter parent, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be right there telling you what they think, walking alongside of you, overriding your own boundaries, your own separate space, your own ability even to solve and create solutions for yourself. So again, I'm interested, and I like that we're kind of going down well-meaning examples, right? That on the other end of it can be problematic the more consistently it happens. Of course, we're not talking about the one occasion where you said that because you were tired or you just didn't have the bandwidth, right? We're talking about when consistently the child comes home, or when consistently the parent is helicoptering around and telling them what to think or how to dress or what to say or what not to feel, in a very well-meaning way. Why? Because I'm trying to protect you for your own best interest. This can also look like, just a third example, in terms of achievement. For very well-meaning ways, a lot of us are given messages, a lot of it is informed by culture with this idea of what this level of achievement we have to aspire to, sometimes for financial reasons, sometimes to help the financial or create financial security for our family members, right? Very understandable, well-meaning reasons, though for some of us, right, only one aspect of our self-expression, achieving and whatever that looks like, right, being the doctor, being the financially successful person who can bring honor, actual financial resources to the family, though, again, very well-meaning, even very understandable where it's coming from, though the message and to the child is only this aspect of yourself is to be seen, heard, and celebrated, when in reality, right, and this very much applied to me, there's so much more of who I am and what I am that's being over time, even by my own self, pushed under the rug because of what I've learned and the conditioning.
Yeah, it's making me realize, and perhaps you've already seen this, that there's this dynamic where, let's say you have a parent who grew up very poor, and then they raise this child and they say, not that. We're not going to do that. We're going to be raised in a household of abundance, and they push that. I think of my own life. I experienced sexual abuse as a kid, and I notice in my not that, it's very tough for me to be physically touchy with like people that I love, especially if it's not like a girlfriend or something like that. And there's this unconscious pull to protect against the particular kind of trauma that you experienced. And in doing so, you can swing so far to the other side because you haven't actually gone into the pain. You've just said, I'm not looking at it. We're not going back there. We're not going back to the poorhouse. We're not going back to being abused. And we're going to stay so far away from that you're still being controlled by that experience and unable to land in, oh, we don't need to achieve all the time. We have enough. Or I can give a loving touch. I know what this feels like versus when it violates something. And that dynamic of not looking backwards because you go, nope, just anything but that can create just a brand new reactionary trauma for the next generation. And I think that's why it is so important that people do slow down and take the time to heal these things in a different way than by simply avoiding repetition.
100%. And thank you, Charlie, for sharing, that aspect of your journey. And what I want to add here as well is this conversation and the action of healing, right, in those moments really does go beyond just having the awareness that you've overcompensated or gone to a side or where the behavior is coming from, right? This is, again, why I've really shifted not only my own healing journey, but the work that I do now into a more holistic, right, where that does include the body. That is, kind of the subconscious and the body that's communicating with that brain, all hours of the day, that's, creating those lived patterns, because it's not just a matter of having that insight or that first step of knowing where this comes from. It's actually a matter of making consistent daily choices that many of us need to include our body and our nervous system so that we actually can begin to make some new choices and rewire those networks, which is absolutely possible regardless of whatever age you are. Our brain and our body can create change at any time. Though I think that's an important aspect of this conversation and the way in which many of us are stuck, right? We know, and this can be very shameful and frustrating experience, yet we can't change because we're not going to be able to unless we do make new choices to become safer in our expression, like you're saying, to actually teach our body that certain levels of physical closeness can be trusted, and you can trust yourself to navigate those boundaries and not to cross your own or someone else's, right? That's a lived experience that only happens when you make those actions. And those actions, again, have to include our body and our nervous system and, that awareness that is playing a role. And oftentimes why we're stuck in that abyss of like, okay, I know. And yet, like you're saying, like, I know that touch can be helpful and healing, yet I just physically, right, I'm struggling to do that. Or me, I can know that there's so much more of me and I can, be more in my self-expression than achievement. Yet in the moments of doing it, right, everything from my subconscious and all of that discomfort in my body is still present.
Yeah, the body work was a huge, and I mean, this all flowed from body work. The truth is, cognitively, I could have told you any of these stories, but there wouldn't have been a felt resonance and certainly not any degree of meaningful healing by being able to say, oh, this happened, that caused this. So what types of, modalities or daily habits do you see have the most positive impact on people when it comes to really rewiring that nervous system to be able to do things in a different way?
So I like to always kind of talk on two levels. The first are the most annoying level. I think the foundational habits of caring for a physical body and a nervous system, right? That bottom layer of that pyramid. Really, again, for a lot of us, that begins with, this might sound really silly, reconnecting, right, with the body that we're living in, right? Tuning into my nutritional needs, my needs for rest or movement, how I'm breathing to make sure I'm, not in a stress state when I'm doing that. I'm getting the oxygen that my cell needs. So again, that's foundational, and there's our foundational commitments I continue to hold myself accountable to. And I'm being very intentional when I say that, because that's not my conditioned habit and pattern. My conditioned habit and pattern is to look outside of myself for, even directives around what to eat, when to eat, right? How to care for my body. It was never asking my own body. I tend to then push my body to the side when I'm busy or I have things to accomplish, busy seasons like this. These are the mornings where it's a very difficult choice for me to say, no, Nicole, go out there and spend, 30 minutes with your body. So those
Can
are
I add
the
one
conditions.
more to this? You wrote, I thought it was so fascinating, that so many of your patients had irritable bowel syndrome. And I find that disconnection with one's gut and literally the ability to take a poop when you need to go to the bathroom because you are in public or it'll make noise or something. It is something people don't talk about, but it's so widespread, this deep shame as around everything related to the fact that you are a human body that defecates, and the disconnection necessary to hold it in when it's inappropriate or not this. And I'm not saying that people should go around pooping their pants, but like there is for me, when I started working at home and could go to the bathroom at leisure, I was like, oh, my irritable bowel is clearing up because I am listening to when I have to go to the bathroom and not sitting politely in a meeting for an extra 10, 15 minutes when I feel the urge to go. But I just have gotten so good at controlling that and stuffing it down that my body now listens to this guy up here instead of receiving signals and telling me, hey, we got to walk out now. This is not as important as just going to the bathroom.
Yeah, I love that example. And the reality of it is, not to go down a whole nother rabbit hole conversation though, I think of school.
Yeah.
We had to raise our hand, right?
Yes.
And say, can I go to the bathroom now? And sometimes
Crazy.
If there was a lesson that you need, the answer was no.
No.
Right? So again, and then more so, how were bodies treated? And I just think of my own family. Bodies were hidden. They were shameful. Mm-hmm. They were judged. They were criticized. They weren't something to be seen and celebrated. I did have a family. Actually, interestingly enough, the girls in my family, my mom, my sister, and I were very comfortable talking about poop and going to the bathroom and all of that. My dad, however, to this day is like, gross, get away from you. So I did have some level of comfort. And I was on the other side of irritable bowel. I had constipation that was so severe. It would be weeks sometimes. And this, again, was a state not of my own. My mom had constipation. My dad, the whole family was constipated. Yeah. Why? Not because it was genetically, gifted to me, because I came to realize my nervous system was so shut down. It was in that dorsal vagal state where our digestion stops completely. Now, with a lot of healing in my body, I have normal digestion. But again, just illustrating all the different messages, to speak to your beautiful point, Charlie, that we get around bodies that turn us away or disgust us or shame us from looking to the valuable wisdom. And I, had to create that shift for myself, pausing and learning how to even attune to my body's hunger signals and needs for rest. And then more so, not only notice, be able to make choices honoring them, even if the people around me, because this is an area I really struggled, weren't eating or were eating something different, or for me around achievement, weren't resting and I needed to rest, right? All of these were moments where I could maybe tell my body was exhausted, but I was so concerned about how it would be if I was resting and someone else was working and what would they think, right? So now all of my conditioned, overachieving beliefs were overriding. And this is, again, the battle that many of us are in, where either we're not attuned to our body, it's not a safe place. We didn't learn that our body has signals to tend to, or, eating because it's a certain time of the day, or eating because we have so much food on our plate, even if we're full, or we are aware and for some conditioned reason, we've told ourselves that we shouldn't listen in that moment.
Yeah. And so I interrupted you. You were going through the body practices of someone, and that was the basic of like, listen to your body's needs, which on the other side of irritable bowel was, I could eat a bag of pretzels and not even blink. And it's like, well, that's not really going to be very good for your digestion, because I was disconnected from the felt sense of what I just knew. I'm crunching. This feels nice, as opposed to like, what is occurring inside? Oh, I'm full. Like I could blow right past that signal. So we have listening to the body, and then what are the other things that can start to bring us back into?
Absolutely. So those are the consistent ones, right? Noticing all of the disconnections, other things that we're making choices around. And then we can get really specific in terms of learning our bodies. I keep focusing on the nervous system for a particular reason. Beginning to notice our body's different stress states, because when we're in a stress or a nervous system response, or, we're going to then probably go down that same habitual pathway of reactivity. And the large majority of us are living with a chronically dysregulated nervous system. So now beyond, right, kind of the foundational, and the more consistently we make those foundational choices to listen to our body and tend to its needs, the more our body naturally will downshift, right, from that sympathetic state. It will begin to feel safer, because a large reason why our body, is in that reactive state is because we're not meeting its needs. Though, again, getting really attuned in real time to our body's stress responses, because those are then the acute moments where we become explosive, right? Maybe just like our in our home had happened, or we become hyper vigilant because in our home, that's the only way we've learned to deal with stress is by monitoring or controlling the environment around us. And, when I'm thinking and talking, and my newest book being about relationships, for a lot of us, the reason why we're so stuck, whether it's in active conflict or in just disconnected, unfulfilling relationships, right, is because it's actually our body's stress response that's returning to that habitual framework that it learned in childhood. How we related in childhood probably will be how we relate in adulthood, right? The way we navigate our emotions, our inability for many of us to deal with stress and other upsetting emotions, probably, because that's all a function of our nervous system, will probably be reflective of the things that worked in our earliest environments. Though as we age and develop relationships, those ways aren't serving ourselves, and they're definitely probably not serving our relationships because they're just keeping us stuck in either those explosive cycles or those disconnected cycles. So then our body stress response becomes, right, how am I breathing in real time? What's happening contextually? What is my mind telling me in these moments of escalated stress awareness? And then can I do something to calm and regulate my emotions? Because that's going to allow me to stay connected to my more grounded prefrontal cortex, right? The ability to maybe drop in and connect. I would always reference our heart as being a great place to drop into in terms of instinct and intuition, especially if we want to be connected in our relationships, right? Now I have choices to make outside of those conditioned ways that I've learned to feel safe. So outside of the, again, consistent things, being really acutely aware in real time. This is, again, where we have to take that, whether it's a meditation practice or just a self-observation, right? This inquiry that many of us get good at doing locked away in a room, where we really want to learn how to hold that space in our awareness in real time. Because if not, our body will rely on those habitual patterns that are ingrained in our nervous system.
Yeah. What I have noticed is that there's definitely patterns in my nervous system that are ingrained, but I also, and I think many people do, set up external circumstances that reinforce that. So I choose partners, business partners, friends, everything that I'm picking around me is someone who fits into my pattern already. And I am overlooking those people who go, this is not a pattern I want to get involved with. And so in the same way that that I needed to go, okay, I need different internal things, I also needed the help of a therapist, somebody, like I needed to go grab someone who was outside of my pattern, who might not have associated with me as a boyfriend or a friend or something, and say, I want to learn different ways of doing things that are not going to necessarily be 100% supported by my family, my friends, my everything, because I've set them up in order to keep this way of being going. And my shift out of this is going to displease, and some people will resist it. So just like there's internal resistance, you've probably set up a circumstance where there's external resistance as well.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up resistance, and that's the reality. We will seek the familiar, even if we will, affirm that we will never create that or be in that same relationship. There will be something physiologically that feels familiar in our body, and then in our mind, we have a part of our brain called the reticular activating system that helps us navigate the endless array of stimulation that we have to deal with as a human. There's just too much to take in. So we're literally vetting and deciding, like filtering more or less, what we're going to pay attention to and the meaning, because our mind is always assigning meaning. It's a meaning-making machine. We're going to rely on the same meanings, again, that we learn to assign in childhood. So we literally, like you're sharing beautifully, become a self-confirming machine where our body is seeking the familiar. Then we're filtering out anything that could be possibly, kind of in opposition to what we think, what we believe, what, kind of our way of being, the way we even know ourselves. Some of us even identify with these very habitual, I call them conditioned selves in my new book, these neurobiological patterns. They become who we are. So now, right, our identity is at risk if we don't find ourselves even uncomfortably in the same situation, and if we don't keep filtering the world in that confirmation. Because again, familiarity gives us a sense of control. It gives us a sense of, efficiency in our ability to deal with it because we've been down this path already, even if, again, it's not the path that we want. And then our mind colludes with it, only allows us like blinders on to see it. And then before we know it, we have created the same confirmatory cycles over and over again. This is what I define as these intergenerational patterns that so many of us are carrying and have carried from so many generations.
Yeah. For me, it was a huge, well, there's many of them, but one of them was codependency, which is like, look, you're going to have to get involved with me codependently in some way. And if you don't want to get involved with me codependently, like if you're a person that doesn't have that hook in you, like, well, we're probably not going to do business or get in a relationship or do anything. And so I think what can happen with me, with other people, is there's oftentimes, and it's never true, and it's never totally true even of your circle, I think, but it can feel like if I get out of this, I lose everything. Like the whole world, because the whole world wants codependency, because the whole world that I created wanted that, right? And everybody, and I'm going to lose everything. And after pushing through or getting through some of those experiences, I found both that there were people in my orbit that did not want codependency and moved closer to me as I began to heal this. And that my beliefs about, oh my God, I'm going to have to lose everything, is certainly the form of some of my relationships had to transform. Especially those foundational ones with mom and dad, like those needed to radically transform. And then relationship, the way that I was as a boss or the way that I was as a boyfriend, but I didn't lose everything. And I think that that's an important thing, is that there's often a time where you're like, I'm losing my mind. I'm going crazy. I'm going to alienate everyone in the world because I've become this bad, awful person that can't relate to anyone around me. And that is not necessarily a symptom that you've lost your mind. It is that you are no longer a match for this dysfunctional system that you have colluded in building. And that can actually be a good sign. And that's why it's so important to get someone out of your orbit to be like, can you reflect back to me that I've not just gone crazy here?
Yeah, I'm relating big time. For me, very much codependency was just, entrenched in me. It's the only way I knew myself to be. And very similarly, when I worked through not only the physiological discomfort of tolerating a separation space, right? Not to be reliant, looking toward someone else. I had to tolerate all the mental discomfort of exactly those worries of, not having this relationship on the other side, not having this connection on the other side, with the reality being, while I was developing the confidence to navigate that, more and more over time, okay, I am okay. I can tolerate this discomfort. And the reality on the other side of it was, either relationships transformed as they did within my family, or a lot of relationships, and I went into what I call my cocoon stage, right, did shift and change. And actually, this was a large reason for even the inspiration behind the Holistic Psychologist Instagram account, which then turned into the Self-Healer Circle community, was beginning to feel like a desire for more authentically connected relationships. And me looking around and not having many of them in my physical proximity, and obviously seeing the social media and online world as a possibility, for that terrain. That's really what inspired me to begin to use the account when I first created it as my own, not only like my own space to practice now in a more global way, although I had no expectation of how global it would be, just a place for me to be me, to see, right, what resonance others would have. And then as the universal resonance really became clear to me, it really continued not only to inspire me and give me confidence of sharing my thoughts as they were, sharing my journey as it was, regardless of, who felt what about it, if I showed or shown it, because I was a psychologist talking about myself and all of the things that came with that, right? That is actually what kind of born and planted the seed for this kind of virtual community, and the healing that I've gained from it, and the reason why I'm now much more in like a public psychology, the way I would describe it, kind of field, and I, run a community membership, and I don't do one-on-one work, was really born out of the healing nature, to speak to your point, of relationships, whether it's with that one supportive, reflective person you're describing, or within a community. It was the absence of having those relationships as I did create separation, which was very difficult to do.
Can you talk about that cocoon phase? Because this is, I think, one of the major things that stops people from moving through it, is that it feels, if you're an achievement type person, and I had this phase where people are like, are you okay? You're not as gregarious. You're not as charismatic. You're not as fun to be around. You're like, and it very understandably looked like I was moving backwards. And it is like you're this larva and you're moving around, you're eating leaves, and now you're just a cocoon. Or I called it hibernating. I was a bear, I was ambling around, and now I'm sleeping for an entire winter. And for me, that lasted, I think it's fair to say, years. Can you talk about the cocoon phase and how people can investigate if it's a healthy move into sort of an inner reflection, or if it's an unhealthy withdrawal from the world and a retreat. How can people suss that out so that they can have a bit more confidence moving into that phase? Because it sounds like, and I know this is true of myself, if you can really do the cocoon phase, you come out a butterfly and things are awesome. And it's so worth it, but it is such a scary thing to say yes to because there's no promises when you're in that cocoon. So I just want to hear you talk about that.
Absolutely. I just want to talk quickly about the cocoon phase, and I'll try to hopefully offer a distinction in this explanation because again, this applies to the nervous system and even our ability to cocoon. Because as overachieving, codependent, who lived in New York City for almost a decade with always something to do and someone around me, and I was a serial monogamist, always in a relationship, right? Never alone, never still, who carried a lot of trauma in my body, a lot of inability to navigate the discomfort of being still. And again, the reason why I'm hyper focusing on this, right, to go inward, right, is our nervous system. Let me word it this way: our nervous system is what is going to allow us the safety to go inward or not. A lot of us who are endlessly going, doing, hyper vigilant and focused on the world around us, right, not able to kind of hit pause, are doing it because there's something that feels inherently unsafe about being alone, right? Maybe we were actually physically alone in childhood. Maybe like me, we were emotionally alone in childhood, right? It feels unsafe to be stopped alone. My body actually won't let me. If my heart rate is pounding, my breath is all quick and my muscles are tense, my nervous system is actually telling me to do the complete opposite of be alone, right? So this is when we try to meditate and we're completely in a stressed out state and we have racing thoughts, get up, you can't, right? That's our body's way of saying, no, Nicole, your priority right now is your survival and you better get the hell out of here because there's something stressful. You can't be still. And I would see this. I saw that like the reason why I would schedule my free time weeks in advance with the fear of having an alone. I wouldn't spend any time alone if I could help it. Right. Went out with other people. Or
you get a phone call. You're constantly, I'm not alone. I just am on the phone all the time.
I would schedule phone dates. I actually had a very good best friend that I had to separate ways with because it wasn't actually a very functional relationship at all, who was always that person that we could just chit chat on the phone the whole time. Right. I never had to be alone. And I saw a similar kind of habit in relationship when I was out with others. I would go out and I got very good at being entertaining, at telling stories, at filling the air. Because in reality, quiet and any pause in conversation was troubling for me. I was uncomfortable in even those silent moments when with another person. So sharing that just foundationally, because to make the distinction, right? Am I going alone in solitude? Is it that safe, nourishing, right? I'm connected and I'm inward in my cocoon because that's what I need right now. Either I'm physically exhausted and burnt out from going and doing, right? Or emotionally, or maybe I just want to explore and I'm curious about myself, right? Is it coming from that nourishing place? Or some of us disconnect because we've learned that connections aren't safe. That's what we do when we're uncomfortable or overwhelmed, right? We remove ourselves because relationships didn't offer us that soothing co-regulation. They actually maybe overwhelmed us, right? Back to that helicopter parent in childhood, right? So we need to, again, attune to what aloneness, silence really is doing. Is it nourishing? Is it coming from that inward deep place, again, where we're, kind of going and exploring and maybe giving ourselves some space to even identify what our needs are? Or are we doing it because connection feels unsafe? Because again, not that connection is necessarily unsafe, but we've learned it to be.
Yes. And I have found that you talked about when your heart is racing and you're meditating, it's not are you meditating or aren't you meditating, or are you alone or aren't you alone? It's are you present in your body or are you dissociating, freaking out, trying to get out of it? And you can look externally any way, right? You can be sitting there looking as zen as possible, but internally, and I see people who meditate consistently, but actually don't get the benefits of meditating because there's such a level of emotional unsafety that they can't drop into the experience. So for me, when I was often going, shit, it's been 3 months, it's been 4 months, it's like I'm still not doing it. there were some moments of genuine relaxation where I was able to go, is this good for me? And the answer was yes. And there were other moments of like high stress where I was like, is this good for me? No, this isn't good for me. And I had to learn to trust the wisdom of that slower, regulated. And I was like, man, this has been a long time. It's just keep, trust. You can continue to do this. And learn that one voice was the voice of panic and another voice was the voice of a much deeper knowing that can be trusted. And so it's like, oh gosh, I want to trust myself, but there's so many conflicting voices. And I found that is a way to find a truer, more trustworthy voice, is to really see, like you've mentioned, what's going on with your nervous system. And that'll give you an indication of what sort of self-talk is going to be, how reliable it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add too, because I'm interestingly still learning how to navigate in terms of, my own tendency to produce, and a version of this conversation of, kind of going inward still. I'm finally living into the reality that I've come to learn is the case, is that there are seasons, even in our own individual life experience, seasons for creation and seasons for going inward and not creating and consuming or doing nothing and just being with our own thoughts. And again, I think that many of us, for many different reasons, again, not trying to, it's funny that school's coming up twice, but it's just coming to mind, right? Even work, right? It's so unnatural, this idea that we have to produce between a certain month span or a Monday to Friday work week between these certain hours. And again, I know some of these are societal realities that are the case. So I used to kind of conditionally hold myself up, right? I need to be producing Monday through Friday at all times. And I'm finally, again, embracing that I do believe humans, universally are creative creatures. And just like the nature outside, there are seasons of, consuming and going inward and just being and percolating and planting. And then seasons of going outward and producing and doing and connecting, or whatever that looks like for you. So I just wanted to add that, because that's another area where I'm still very much on my own process and journey of even learning how to navigate my own kind of cocooning, if you will, creative cocooning, in the face of knowing that I might have people always wanting something, right, to come from me. So then again, it's that negotiation of checking in with, and am I forcing myself? And I'm always kind of holding myself accountable with like book projects and ideas and many things that I want to create into the world, right? What am I responding to? Is it really coming from the internal desire and do I want to do this thing? Do I have the resources to do this thing? Is now the time to action into doing this thing? Or again, is it coming from all that other crap?
Yeah. This came up earlier, but I think it's a great time, which is there is this tension between, I think a lot of people are afraid that if they listen to themselves, they'll become totally selfish, narcissistic jerks. And that is why there is a loving attunement to other people. I have this gift to give, and other people want me to write another book. And, I shouldn't go to the bathroom right now because I don't want this person to feel disrespected that I don't care about the speech that they're giving. And I know that there's not an easy answer, but I do want to highlight, it's not what I want all the time, and irrespective of what is occurring outside of me, nor is it I attune to the entire world and that tells me who I am. How do we manage both social engagements, responsibilities, duties, and that listening to the internal, whether it's as the cycle of having to go to the bathroom or a cycle of I need a year off and I'm not writing any books and I'm not taking any clients, even though they see me as someone that could really help them. Like how do we navigate those seemingly opposing drives?
Yeah. I think universally in any relationship, whether it's between two people, between you and your productivity or your community or whatever it is, there's an energetic exchange. And, foundationally, for relationships to survive and to continue to thrive and be successful and sustainable, there's, of course, to speak to your point, a give and take, right? A negotiation, a honoring of differing needs, different energies, right? Different abilities to be present and supportive, if we want to apply the conversation to relationships in particular, different abilities to produce or not produce, if we want to apply the conversation to that we were just having. So energy is being exchanged. We're always in relationship to someone or something, the first relationship beginning with ourselves, and then obviously with anyone and any entity outside of ourselves. So that's, in my opinion, in the energetic universe that I believe we all live in, an energetic reality. And saying that to say, I think the idea that some of us have been given societally, culturally, driven from many different, familial reasons of selflessness, or selfishness on the other side of it, showing up in service. I call them the good person beliefs that I know I had, right? This idea of needing to be endlessly available or at service of that person or that entity, right? At the detriment of our own self, not even factoring ourselves in. And that, I believe, is problematic and dysfunctional, because to be an energetically caring and compassionate creature, we have to, in my opinion, be energetically connected to the organ of compassion, actually the most powerful organ in our body, which is our heart.
Yeah.
Right. To actually be loving in the way that we think we're loving, we have to be safely grounded, right, with a body that has needs met, that has emotions, that's in that grounded state of presence. It's, having emotions because they color our world and they create information. Though I'm not becoming overwhelmed or disconnected, I'm able to, right, be in even a point of negotiation. I'm even able to see your perspective as a different individual. I'm able to hold compassionate space and connection even when those perspectives differ. Yeah. And when we are in a nervous system state of activation, or we're having a stress response or a trauma response, again, that many of us are living in, we actually cannot be that. We all become, and I know this is an unpopular opinion, we all become narcissistic. We become self-focused. We are actually, even if we think we're serving them, we're managing their perception of us. Right? We're not actually able physiologically, because when we're in survival mode, it really just comes down to our evolution and the way we're wired. We are only focused on ourselves. And this doesn't matter if it's your mom, if it's your partner, if it's your child. This is why, and I'll speak from my own lived experience, I can become hurtful. I can say mean things. I can do mean things, whether it's explosively mean things or disconnecting mean things. Oh, you'll miss me when I'm gone. Something I heard, right? In my childhood, we're not actually compassionate in those moments at all. And again, it's more underlying, I think, in these roles and these ways we serve, and we think we're being good. But if that goodness isn't coming from that grounded, calm, connected, compassionate space of our heart, then in reality, we are a bit more self-focused, and I think many of us are willing to acknowledge. And again, this is the basis of my book. So much of it is kind of built around the nervous system. And actually, to be, right, the love we seek, it has to begin with that state of heart-brain coherence that actually then will create that safety for another individual, our ability to see them as separate, our ability to hold space for them as separate, to be kind and compassionate and caring, whether or not we choose to relate with them or not, then we actually become that love. But again, it foundationally includes our body, our nervous system, and all of the conversation that we beautifully had.
Yes, I'm right there with you. I think with a lot of this, I want to try to make it approachable to someone who maybe hasn't had as much therapy or experience, and holding spaces. What does that mean? So zooming out, I think that while we all have some always connection to our hearts, I did not have a conscious connection to it, even though I was a very good person for an extremely long time. I became a philosophy major because my foundational question was, what does it mean to be good? I knew that if you donated 10% to charity, that made you a good person. So I donated 15 or 20. You know what I mean? I was like, I left gray room for just in case I was wrong. But it was not from a heart place. It was, and other people benefited from it. I did kind acts. They supported other people. But it was not from my heart. It was from, and I can speak about myself without being vicious. It was a narcissistic, how does this reflect on me? I'm afraid to be bad, so let me do good. And from that place, you can never offer the highest good to yourself or other people, ever. Even if you donate 30% or 50% or the shirt off your back, if you're not moving from a felt connection of your heart. And if you're going, I'm not sure about that, that's a great sign that this would be an area for you to start to, like, if this doesn't deeply resonate with you, this is really, really useful, tremendous work that you can do for yourself and for everyone around you. And we talked about it, but one that I know that you do that has helped me tremendously has been breath work, which is, if you can Google holotropic breath work, we don't need to go into it. There's a ton of tracks. I've left tracks for people on my podcast, but it gives you not oh my gosh, there's children in Africa and they need food. but a felt compassion sense, usually not for necessarily children in Africa, but for yourself, for the people around you, for your animals, for the person that you encountered behind the cashier. And it can take time to unravel and then last in your daily life. But that has been so powerful for me to know, am I in my heart or not? And then the nice thing is, I have found that love takes, and this is a different conversation, I want you to be able to respond, but we can go here. Love looks very different than I thought that it did. I thought love was saccharine and saying yes and giving, and love looks very, very different from the heart. And so, yeah, if you have any thoughts or things you wanted to jump in with, I'll pause there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to go back to this right idea of being so selfless, the byproduct of that is resentment. Whether or not you actually feel resentful of the world around you, or you become, and this is very much what was happening when I kind of reached the end of my to-do list and I went through my dark night of the soul and into my cocoon stage. It was motivated from pure exhaustion.
Yeah.
Where I would fantasize, about and actualize a lot of ways about disappearing, about leaving my job, right? This idea of I energetically, right? So it wasn't necessarily that I was walking around mad at the world around me, that some people are, and that can very much not only damage our ability to be compassionate creatures, really cause harm to our relationships, to strangers we meet when we erupt from that place of resentment, or it can very much look like, again, this just exhaustion of if we can't even, show up in service of ourselves because we're so depleted, how are we ever going to be able to engage in that energetic exchange? And, for me, I'm very much, breath work, the daily practices. Again, it's still a point of top of mind, accountability. I still have that pull to put my body to the back burner. And while I have created enough connection, I have come to that same realization that love is a daily choice. And in my opinion, it's, again, the choice to stay so committed to my own self-expression and to creating safety for the ones I love around me and their self-expression, even if it's a difficult awareness, even if it's a difficult perspective, even if it's a difficult conversation, how to learn how to navigate conflict. For a long time, I thought love meant not having conflict at all, right? Being problem-free, right? This idea of the happy, healthy family, right? That I thought I had. In reality, we just didn't know how to navigate conflict. We were operating, right, as this codependent unit like we talked about. So very much living into, still in a lot of ways, teaching my mind and my body what authentic love, how to live in that space. I by no means have just switched on the light switch and I'm there. It's a moment-to-moment choice, which, again, bringing it full circle really begins with, well, how well, Nicole, are you taking care of yourself? Do you have that ability to have energy, to exchange, to open yourself up? Even, again, a little girl didn't know emotional connection, still feels really uncomfortable being emotionally vulnerable and, authentic with even those that I've committed to spend my life with, because that's unfamiliar and inherently still feels unsafe. So my hope for any of the work, and especially this particular work around relationships in general, how to be the love you seek, is really to maybe give a new definition, because we're operating on old ideas of love, on old relationship patterns, on old ways that we've learned how to create safety, on ill-sufficient or unsupported environments entirely. Again, often no one's fault, kind of generationally passed on. And I'm ever inspired because of conversations like this and communities like both of ours and people who are, kind of coming to these new awarenesses and beginning to make these new choices and to actually live in action, whether it's, breaking cycles, redefining love, learning new ways to be compassionate collaborators that I believe we're all capable of being. And I'm ever hopeful because I do believe this is how humanity is going to continue to evolve and change and move toward a more kind of harmonious, that I do think we're capable, heart-centered existence. Even those we disagree with and don't want to relate to, right? Creating the safety and the space to allow us all to find our way, the way that works for each of us individually.
Yeah, that, what you just described there is like a much larger space than I think existed in most families. And so when I think of what love meant in my suburban area generally, it was the ability to be polite on command. That was love. So love is say thank you, whether or not you're grateful. Share your toy, whether or not you like that person. Say you're sorry, whether or not you feel sorrow. And what that teaches, or inadvertently, is compliance with social norms instead of a felt sense of connection, because what you would ideally have is that a thank you arises out of one, you did something for me. So I'm saying thank you to my grandma for this shirt that I hate that shows that she doesn't even really know me. You know what I mean? Like, she knows nothing about me. I'm one of 40 grandkids, and say thank you. Now you're teaching me to be fake to grandma, and I never had a relationship with that grandma. That was, I got $20 shirts and then I had another grandmother who I did not need to be told to say thank you to, because it was a very different relationship. Similarly, when, what are the other ones? They're saying thank you, say you're sorry. I am just learning what sorry means. Now, I've said sorry in my life, but I did not know that sorry comes from sorrow. It comes from sadness over a breach of connection that has not just, oh my God, I'm afraid that I pained you, but it hurts me to be separate from you in this way. And being told to be, and there was always I think a weirdly healthy part of me that resisted saying sorry when I didn't mean it, and made me someone who doesn't say sorry all that often. But I found out that part of me was like, no, I'm hanging on for the real thing. I'm hanging on for the part of you that knows the depth of this word. And I think when we force children or people around us to ape love, to ape I'm okay, to ape I'm sorry, I'm grateful, and we just practice the surface level of those, we miss the fact that it is totally available underneath if you give it time and space to work out, I hate you. You took that from me. How dare, all of those mean parts, they do work out over time if there is space for them to be expressed.
So beautiful. I love all of that. And just calling to mind an Instagram post, a lot of another add to the teachings. Don't say anything if you can't say something nice. Another version of that, right?
Horrible.
With this idea, just tying this all together, this idea of self-expression and being seen and heard, and what we're defining as nice, and sharing your perspective for anyone listening is actually a gift that you're going to give all of those around you. Of course, you can do it in a respectful way and a calm, grounded way, and saying hard things is a part of being a separate person, of navigating these differences, and on your back end, like you're sharing, of taking accountability and responsibility and acknowledging when we've, caused a pain. And it really does, again, all beautifully come from being connected to ourselves and our own emotions. And again, that I think is another one of those examples of this idea on the surface, right, of what is constituting nice. And if it's in alignment and in our authentic truth, whether it's our perspective or our emotional truth, whatever it might be, right, there is value in finding the respectful, calm way to say it, even if you've been taught it isn't nice for whatever reason it might be.
And I have found that, when I think of love, it's just larger, it's more spacious, it can contain more. And so for me, that is, and there are other people that are on their own journey. So for me, it has meant, okay, in the privacy of my own bedroom, I have the safety to fucking rage. I have the safety to be a mean mother about, and bitter and resentful and blame and point the finger and how dare you, with the understanding that this is not the deepest truth of who I am, but it is a necessary expression that if I ignore this and never attend to it, every love that I give beyond that is going to be with a bit of resentment, with the hate, with the fact that I'm self-denying in order to get there. So in the space of my own bedroom, I can go buck wild. In certain relationships, I can deliver hard truths, potentially with some bitterness in them. And then in others, they require a degree of very, very gentle touch. And in sorting through what is what, with whom can I do this, and knowing that there has to be a space of just ultimate honesty, which is inside of myself for whatever comes up, that learning has been very tough, because one of the things that we can touch on now is I did not have healthy boundaries growing up. My boundaries were constantly transgressed. And so part of what that meant is if I had a feeling, I either shut it down or I just tell you I just give it all to you, because I didn't know how to have flexible boundaries that were context dependent. And I think you talk a lot about how people that struggle with being overly blunt, and I know I felt this, feel this tear between I don't want to be inauthentic and I don't know how to do. That is a boundary issue. That is not an issue where you have to sacrifice any degree of honesty. It's just you probably don't have or were not modeled healthy boundaries. And there is a way to have 100% honesty and integrity and not destroy other people needlessly with that expression of what's going on inside of you.
Yeah, and this again touches on where we began in a lot of ways, which is the first person that we need to be honest with is ourselves, right? And for a lot of us, it's coming to terms with really hard, difficult realities and truths and feelings, right? So that is a whole step and process, right? To actually allow in our awareness what is so or what was so or what our want or need is before even, right, we package it up and give it or communicate it with someone else. So I want to emphasize that that's a step in and of itself, because so few of us are connected enough, are self-centering. We can't say that because we're not good. We can't even think that because of what it might mean, if that even crossed our mind, or to have this need that's in opposition to someone else before I even tell them. I'm just going to squash that down. And then to speak to your point, very much like you, I'm relating to a lot of your journey of needing then to find, right, the boundaried ways to first create safety for that own exploration, safety for our own ability to navigate and regulate our nervous system, not to. And those moments, I would imagine, I know for me, when I'm saying things in a way that, you know, are hurtful, are moments where I'm not in that calm, grounded place, where I don't hit pause or ask to resume the conversation, or I pick up the phone before I'm really in a grounded place where I have the resources to, you know, be available to what might be on the other end. And those, again, are all choices that we can begin to make for ourselves without requiring anyone around us to do anything, so that when we do then practice communicating, something that for a lot of us, you know, especially if we have all these conditioned reasons why we haven't done or said the thing for so long, or it's going to be incredibly difficult. And then we're going to open ourselves up to what the reaction of this other person might be. And a lot of us, like you're sharing, kind of go, when we don't have boundaries, we either get so tight boundaries, or we don't say what's on our mind, then we say everything that's on our mind. And again, it is because all of this, again, tracks back to the body, our ability to stay calm and grounded when we're having an upsetting feeling, to communicate or to remove ourselves until we're into that calm, grounded place, and regulate ourselves through breath work or grounding or whatever it is, and make sure that we're consistently maintaining that ability and not just having the conversation because someone else wants to, or because we're activated and we just need to say the thing. Actually hitting pause and returning either to our own self-regulation point or to that safe, you know, professional or other friend or grounded nervous system, where we then can set ourselves up to then begin to speak the things that are difficult and stay grounded while we're doing that. And boundaries, you know, becomes the important component to that, noticing when we don't have them and developing, like you're sharing, the ability to be flexible, to be nuanced, to tailor our expression and even our engagement with certain relationships contextually or relationally dependent. And I think this is something else that is important to unpack for a lot of us, is we apply, many of us, I know I did, a one-size-fits-all model to this is friend. This is what friend looks like, what friend does, what I do in friendship. And I'm learning that actually I have many different types of friendships now. I have some that we connect on certain interests. I have some that we connect on certain activities, right? Same thing with relationship. We kind of apply these one-size-fits-all models in the context of boundaries, right? To big relationship categories. And we don't develop, and this is an ability that we can develop for ourselves, like you're sharing, this ability to be nuanced and contextual and to be engage with different relationships in different ways and evolve then different relationships. If we are going with an expectation that is not being met for whatever reason, right? Develop other relationships where we can get those needs met. So boundaries becomes the space that we can explore ourselves and also then better explore and connect with other people, and also tuning into, if you are someone that is applying a very unhelpful one-size-fits-all kind of expectation across relationships, and creating the possibility that relationships can look different. And that might mean different boundaries, different ways of being, different ways of connecting in different relationships. It doesn't lessen the relationship. It just creates more diversity, more difference, and in my opinion, more harmonious and interconnected relationships where both people's authenticity can be honored without trying to pressure or force or coerce or manipulate or all the things that we do to try to fit people into what we think it should be or should look like or should feel like.
Yeah. I'll share a story about boundaries because I'd love to give people something concrete to sink their teeth into, because I know that if you told me, hey, Charlie, you have weak boundaries 3 years ago, I'd been like, what are you talking about? I am so tough. And oftentimes weakness can dress itself up in get away from me, like super strong, because behind that, I have strong boundaries is once you're in, you could take everything. You know what I mean? It's just yes, always, once you're in. So I have this front of a strong boundary and inside of that very, very weak boundary. So just one example, and I appreciate her allowing me to talk about it on the podcast. My mom, we're working a lot of this stuff out and it is definitely improving. But just one small example of how this occurred is she visits me here. I have a wonderful home that for some reason, it's not my, I rent here, but it has 2 showers in the master bedroom. And there's other showers available, but my mom would use the shower in here. And it wasn't like she was doing, inappropriate or anything, but it was just, she was entering into my bedroom when she wanted to. And she would knock on the door, but it was just like, that was okay. And it took me a while. I was like, I don't really mind, there's nothing wrong with that. And then it's like, I kind of, and it was this like slowly creeping, could you not do that? And I didn't have a good reason. It felt so inappropriate for me. Like, you're not doing anything wrong, but I just don't want that. And then initially she received it as, you're telling me that I'm doing something wrong. I didn't mean, it was a bit of a defensive reaction on her part. And I realized that our pattern had been, when I had a boundary of that it wasn't saying you're doing something wrong. It's just, I would just prefer to be alone right now. My mom received that as like the boundary had spears pointing out of it at her, as if she had done something wrong or bad or violent towards me. And so in order to avoid causing that reaction in her, okay, you could shower in here. Okay, you can come. You could, and it became, yes, because I don't want to hurt you and it's not that important. And in learning, that feeling that I have of mild discomfort that I can't justify is important. It is important. And I'd prefer if you did something else, and I could say that with love. And this is another thing, that you still might receive this as hurtful. And that doesn't mean that I am communicating hurtfully or without love. That was a very challenging one for me to wrestle with, which is, you can sit in the most grounded love and people will sometimes receive that because of what they have experienced as an attack or hurt. And so learning, first find yourself and then bring that as best you can to someone else. But their reaction does not define the energy that you came from, still is a very complicated thing to sit with, especially when that person is a parent who you love and want to be close with, and all of those other things are mixed up with.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving that very concrete example. And, again, it oftentimes we do carry that, childlike tendency to personalize right, reactions. And more often than not, the reactions that people are having around us, again, whether it's mom in your instance or partner or whomever, are more to do with them and what they're feeling inside and their own, conditioning, which is contributing to that, and likely nervous system dysregulation, which is causing that that feeling of personalization and offense. And how dare you not tell me to go in your room and I did something bad. And again, all of that is much more connected to likely, what happened with mom, and very similarly in my family, even any gesture or movement toward creating any space, declining the invite for Sunday dinner, like I was sharing earlier, or not picking up the phone and beginning to communicate when it was or wasn't a good time, very much would result in a personalized reaction of, oh, what, don't I matter to you anymore? Isn't this family important to you anymore? And especially if there was could have been perceived in the family as a stressful moment, right? A seemingly like health crisis call, though again, so consistently they happened, it would be even more elevated. How dare you not pick up this phone in this moment? And that is the reality for a lot of us. It's not just doing something new for ourselves, which is going to be inherently uncomfortable because it'll be unfamiliar and it'll be challenging a lot of our conditioning, though a lot of us are met with, a reaction of sort from someone else and their conditioning and their pain. So, having those moments of, asking for space for me and tolerating, hearing reflected right back. How dare I am selfish, putting myself first or whatever it was, and beginning to understand that the reason, even sometimes the reason I needed space had nothing to do with them and the event. It had something to do with what was going on in my relationship or in my professional life, right? I wouldn't have been able to attend an event for anyone. It had nothing kind of personalized to my family or whomever I was declining the invite to. Yet we have that tendency, many of us, to hear it as an attack on us. And then depending on our own ability to navigate those moments, we might be on or their inability, I should say, to navigate those moments, we might be on the receiving end of having our worst fear confirmed, right? And of being really challenged in those ways. So
it's the flip side of that is if you can receive a request for space, whether made verbally or if somebody's just not answering your text or something, and you can not necessarily personalize it, that is such a gift to yourself and to the other person, and is far more likely to make that relationship work. Even just, guys, when they want to get a girl to come out and say, hey, you want to go out? Hey, it's like, if you could give, I'm not promising this is going to happen, but a little bit of breathing room would go a long way in terms of boosting the odds, because what she's receiving from you right now is pressure and need, and that she needs to, if she's going to spend time with you, is going to be meeting a need of yours, somebody who she doesn't even know very well, and she's got a whole life of other stuff going on. And so it's funny, all of the things which to me were tactics to my young 20 self, which is wait 3 days or this, there's deep emotional reasons that these things are important that go beyond, you got to play hard to get. It's like, no, people want generally to be around those people that can manage their own needs and not add more to their plate, except when done consciously. When you could say, hey, I need help, I love you, can you support me, is very different than covertly trying to get someone to do something for you. So I don't want people to think that you need to have all your needs met individually and you can't ask the people you love. That is not the case at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, it's an exchange. There is a need for support. Sometimes there is a need for presence. Sometimes there is a need for assurance, for someone being on the other end of that text and saying, I still love you and I just need this space right now. And all of that can be, again, a grounded conversation and negotiation, a compromise, a give and take, though, again, very much relating to my inability for a very long time of not, projecting the old assigned meaning to what space meant. Because in my childhood, my mom, again, for no ill intent, for her own ability to navigate her emotions, disappointment and anger in general, which I very much continue to struggle with myself, would give the silent treatment. So for me, silence actually did mean the relationship was damaged. There's a disconnection here. And I saw that play out time and time again, where I would harass. If I wasn't harassing in some degree of upset about how you better respond to me right now, or that's it, I'm leaving and this relationship is over and you don't care about me, right? It could escalate into that. It would be a more covert way if there was an upset of just making plans and scheduling every day. Tomorrow night we're doing this and the next night we're doing this, and kind of just trying to bridge that space or not leave space for space, which could on a very surface, I'm charming. I'm just trying to hang out with you all the time. But really, I'm just trying to, collapse the possible space that I could feel and the worry that I'll feel when that space occurs. Or like I said, there are absolutely moments where that space would escalate. And then I would do exactly like my mom did. Either in my mind's eye, you'll miss me when I'm gone, or actually tell the person, well, this is it. This is the final straw. You're not answering me is confirmation that you just don't care. My language, you don't consider me. And so this is just affirmation that this relationship isn't right for me. And I'd endlessly break up and not mean it. And then, the connection would happen.
Please no.
I would get to hear what actually happened or not. And I'd sheepishly be like, oh, I don't really mean that, And, I would actually pull the trigger and just leave to protect myself, because I couldn't tolerate what that space could possibly mean. I assigned that old meaning, right? Space meant I did something wrong, bad, I disappointed, I upset someone I loved. And then again, I would go into all these gymnastics of pursuing, of trying to make myself more appealing. And if it didn't work, of just getting angry and saying, I'm going to punish you and I'll show you the same pain I'm feeling right now.
So fascinating that the experience that most matched your mother was underneath a coping mechanism that was on its surface very different, which was this charming, pleasing person who was totally fun and wonderful to be around. And I think this is extremely common because we have this, one, as we've discussed, we model what we learn, but also two, we don't want to do it that way because we've been on the flip side of it. So we have this surface level veneer of, in your case, I'm super fun, charming to be around. Why would you ever want to be apart from me? And it's like, nah, I still want to be apart. It's like, boom, right back to like, no, here's mom. And I've seen, for me, realizing that I carry that from my dad because I'm never going to be like him. I'm never going to be like, I am so different from, and then just going, oh my God, it is, and there's this beauty and gifts and love in all of that and a deeper understanding of where he was coming from. And, all of those wonderful things have happened. But I think that people do not realize the degree to which their parents are like some stress away from just being the person that they fully become at any given moment in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever.
Yeah. And again, depending on the relationship we had, how confronting, how difficult. Right? Because now we have to confront ourselves and whatever, our patterns and the devastation that it caused. It brings us right back in that childhood and that wounding and that pain and, not having our needs met and that neglect or whatever it is for us. Right. And now, again, if we don't have the emotional resilience, right, how difficult that is to navigate.
Yes. So I think we can wind up talking sort of about, We've done some of this, but I want to hear what you noticed particularly to men and women. So I saw that you had a post about the types of things that you see often in men. One of the hallmarks that everybody can point to is they've got one emotion, and it's anger. Can you talk about broadly across American society what is going on with men from a psychological, emotional thing? We hear a lot about toxic masculinity. What is your perspective on the masculine and men generally in, let's say, America?
Yeah. Globally, I think humans struggle, adults struggle, are ill-equipped to deal with their emotion. If we want to kind of direct the conversation along more gendered lines, but I would say that globally, I think women, it just looks different. Yeah. Again, we've adapted. Maybe we can relate more to the pleaser, the helper, the selfless, doer for someone else, the caretaking role, things like that. There's just different adaptations. So I think at our core, we all really, really struggle to tolerate and to navigate our emotional experiences. And even more so, I think the societal messaging, the familial messaging that's passed down. I even think about just evolutionary roles, like back in time in terms of what certain, gendered individuals more or less did or were responsible for in our earliest groups. And it did look different, and there's different energies and different expressions and, different ways that, the world is navigated. And saying that to say, then we have all of this different societal messaging that is often kind of born on this idea, just go to anger, right? That men's role is to be tough and to pillage and to, take control of or to defend, and in an evolutionary way, likely there was a group of male-identified individuals at some time where that was the natural energetic expression that benefited that community, and obviously, female-identified individuals at that time maybe energetically were more naturally, kind of shifting into other roles. And then, so with that, then I do think got layered upon layered, and all of this idea of, weakness and what it is, and maybe the one appropriate emotion, again, being this more kind of angry, controlling kind of way of being that then gets reflected back from society and oftentimes celebrated then by other kind of messaging that just continues to lock us in our cycles, whatever it is. And I think, with women on the other side of it's very much like the caretaker, the putting others first, this kind of idea of being good girl, if we really want to gender the kind of good person conditioning. I think that can, very much be a part of that. And, again, I think at our core, we are more similar. We have the same range of emotions that we are tasked to figure out how to navigate. We're similarly ill-equipped. And I do think that unifies us are just adaptations and the ways that we've navigated it and been validated it have kind of evolved us to look very different. But I think the work really is the same, right? Becoming aware of what is the conditioning that we're carrying that's disconnecting us. If you are, a male listening and, anger you're really comfortable with, there are many other human emotions, to make space for, and again, it begins with you. Are you able to even be sad in your room? Right? Are you able to, kind of grieve for maybe what wasn't in your room? Are you able to create space for yourself before then you're able to safely communicate that to someone else? And again, that applies to women even listening too, right? If you only kind of cycle around one emotion, to hear me say that, in my opinion, there's like 6 core emotions, if they're not present, if you also can't come back or rebound from an emotion, how long we're spending in emotions is also a signal for our ability or our inability and our nervous system's inability to come back to that calm, grounded state. For some of us, right, having emotions, anger lasts for days, weeks of resentment. My mom, that silent treatment I was sharing would go on at the time I can recall it being its worst when she actually found out that I was gay, was almost probably 2 months.
Wow.
Like of time of that feeling that my mom wasn't actively consciously being, she was caught in that feeling that was so alive for her for that long that she actually couldn't rebound herself to reconnect with me. And then when she finally could, at whatever point that would be, it would be as if life just
nothing
resumed,
happened. Yeah.
Like nothing happened, like just get back on track. And because that really did track on to my mom's emotional world. She was stuck in the emotion, and then finally her body downshifted, and whether it was disappointment or anger or whatever it was that I upset her caused emotionally, that finally went away and she was able to return to baseline, and then our relationship was able to go back. So again, any of you listening, right, if emotions are living, I mean, there's kind of physiological, scientific, I think I cite it in my first book, How to Do the Work. It's upwards of like 90 seconds of the physiology, the neurotransmitters, the shifts in our nervous system and sensations that are associated with the emotional experience. So the reality of it is we're living in them for much longer, because our nervous system is stuck and can't downshift physiologically, or we're not giving it the chance to because we're going on that walk to calm down, but we're rehashing the story that actually I come home more upset, right? So now my mind,
because I've got six new ways I'm going to poke at you now because I thought
6 new ways and 6 other ways that you've actually done this to me that I never brought up and now, right? So our mind then gets involved, and so when I say 90 seconds, I know that's not the lived experience that most of us are having, but that is our actual physiological ability. We can cultivate that in ourselves. So are we feeling all of the ways? Are we feeling sad? Are we feeling joyful? Are we feeling fearful? Are we feeling disgusted? Are we feeling surprised? Those being core emotions. And can we come back from feeling that way and come back to calm, to peace, to baseline? Even me saying that, for some of you listening, you might never, I know for decades, I never really felt peacefulness in my body, grounded presence in myself. I wasn't able to actually feel that way because physiologically I wasn't. I was stuck. For me, it was in worry, stress, fear, on the kind of fear core emotion cycles that I was stuck in that lasted for decades until, again, I did the work with my body. I learned how to be in my own grounded presence and actually how to regulate my emotions so that I could finally not only express them to myself that I was having this emotion, then express them to the world.
You gave the first question I asked, which is, what is it like to not be seen? I thought that was the best example of 2 months of silent treatment and back in. And what it is to not be seen, I think I have an answer now, which is, it is oftentimes a parent who is so stuck in that loop of unintentional narcissism, which is, how does this make me feel? How does this make me feel? How does this make me feel? That by the time they break that loop, they haven't been able to pay attention to you for 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 2 months. And so they could say sorry, but they can't even mean it because they weren't there for 2 months. And so that is what it is to not be seen, is to go, okay, and when we're just back, which is, oh, you completely missed how devastating this was to me. You genuinely have no idea because you were so in your own stuff. And that is, it's a wonderful, I don't mean wonderful, but that is a quintessential example of what it is to not be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your emphasis again on they, caught in their own. not able to even remove or zoom out to notice the other individual, again, whether it's your child, your partner, your mom, that is there having a different experience and experiencing you in a different way. So that's why it does feel like they're just back to business as usual, and you're left trying to make sense of what has happened. And again, I just want to speak this too for any of us who maybe do the silent treatment ourselves. Moments of repair are so incredibly important for a secure connection. And what that simply means is after you come to, right, developing the ability and the awareness to have that moment of accountability and responsibility. And or if you're not sure how it might have affected those around you, to ask and be curious, and then sit through the discomfort of hearing how it might have been. Because I fear, and I hear a lot of people's concerns of, well, I do this. Is this irreparable now? Or is this relationship? No, actually secure relationships are built around moments of disconnection and moments of reconnection. So if you're coming to the awareness that there's more moments of disconnection in your world, that's okay. You can cultivate then the awareness to, even if you're not sure or can't imagine how it might have been for someone else on the receiving end of whether it's the explosion or the disconnection, to ask. And again, to do so when you're in a calm, grounded place, to hear and to navigate that conversation like you're beautifully sharing, when you're actually connected to the place. Someone that I really admire in the field, his name's Frank Anderson. We did a parenting collaboration recently together, and he, in the context of parenting, though applies to everyone, was saying, don't apologize or reconnect with your child until you're able to feel compassion for them. Or even care to inquire about curiosity, I could add, before maybe even compassion. Maybe you don't know what their experience is to be compassionate about. But until you can generate that curiosity that there was someone else on the other end of an experience, that it involved you in some way, your presence or absence, whatever it was, until you can honestly care and be curious to ask, right? Because we rush, we feel uncomfortable, we go back, or like, and we're not in the place to actually care to hear. We're kind of going through the motions of like being back and like saying, well, how did that make you feel? But really we're like, I don't care because I felt this way, really generating, I love this is like beautifully mapping onto our whole conversation, really generating that curiosity to be able to sit. And then through the discomfort of maybe hearing something really difficult that how you were resulted in.
I am so glad that you said that, because to have left people on the hook with that shame of, oh my God, I do this, that is what keeps people from apologizing. And I can tell you that I've received apologies from, say, my dad that were 25 years after the fact that changed my life. Hit me a real connected sorry 25 years later is infinitely better than a disconnected sorry 25 seconds later. And it is and you get infinite chances. You really you can always come back to it. 25 could have been 50 years and it would have been just as meaningful to me. So I say that hopefully that people who, myself included, we've all been that person who has ruptured a relationship, who can feel that and go, the shame that is keeping me from sitting openly in front of them, because this is beyond repair. It is not. I think most people do not know the beauty of repair, especially like the worse the fracture, the more beautiful the repair can be if it is done honestly and sincerely with a genuine curiosity and not a forced, I'm not the bad guy anymore, let me sit and do my part.
Yes, absolutely. And just to, again, play another side of that, for those listening who, on the other side of wanting an apology for whatever reason, the person is not alive, the relationship is so disconnected, we don't actually know how to access them, they won't give us that, right? We can, offer our own self that, forgiveness, and embodying that same, everything we've been talking about, the same compassion, the same empathy, the same understanding, right? And even, the desire to want and wish things to be different, we can kind of, ease our way into the reality of how it was. Because again, the difficult side for some of us is, for whatever reason, we might not hear what we want to hear, right? Though we can continue to show up and to give ourselves and to meet our needs and to create the relationships that are securely connected, that is how we offer ourselves, I think, the ultimate kind of healing gift in absence of having those beautiful moments that absolutely can come at any time. But I did want to speak to that as well.
Sure.
For imagining people listening, like, well, what if I,
what if
I
they're
know
dead?
I'm never getting that, or I know this person, and for whatever reason, it's never going to come. There is so much healing that we can offer ourselves, even in absence of having those beautiful reparative moments. Though, yes, to speak to your point, they can happen at any time. And if it is shame, for me, I struggle. I don't like to be seen less than shiny. I don't like to be anyone other than that good person that. Right. So having to even apologize and say, ugh, I did something and I have to hear how, it's hard. It's difficult. So, learning how to tolerate and how to actually in the book, one of the last chapters is, how to offer an apology, kind of the practical steps of what that really does look like. And it looks more like listening from our heart than actually, kind of talking, explaining, saying the right thing. It's much
here's
more
why
of
I did it. Here's why I did it. Here's what I was feeling. That is not it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I'll speak to my own experience of recent. I can still go into that defense mode, right? The court case of building my, kind of reason for you just to see my perspective. And it's not always, in those moments about our perspective. And it's really difficult to put our perspective aside. And again, it all really comes down to, can we actually physiologically access that space to do that? And then emotionally, can we contain all of the different ways without trying to fix it or defend it and just be with it?
Beautiful. This is the last actual question that I have for you, because I've heard it underpinning a lot of it, and I see it in the book, and it's been true in my life, is that even the example of someone has passed away and died, how do I get that repair? There's an element of my healing that has only been possible, and it brings up such shame in me, but it's true, with a felt sense of spirituality and a felt sense of connection with my soul. And those are not words that I could have used without grimacing and still struggle to just a short time ago. And I don't say that merely because it's an effective strategy. I say it because it feels deeply true. I see it in your book from the very first needs of the soul, that I do not believe that, one, real confrontation with reality is possible, but secondarily, a deep understanding of who you are and a deep healing without, you don't need to take my word for it, you can find your own way, but something beyond, as you to say, the personality. And I would just like to hear you allude to that for people who might be curious.
Another moment I'm really resonating with your journey. Actually, in one of the chapters where I dive into even the concept of soul, I mean, I would have cringed, rolled my eyes, wondered where the science is, show me it on a map, like, what are you talking about? And it really, has taken me unpacking, and, I think we find our way, and even in my workbook, How to Meet Yourself, it's very much based on your authentic self, which I would very much akin in definition to this concept of the soul, your unique energetic expression. And as often I do, I think I've probably frustrated a lot of buyers of that workbook, because I imagine they were expecting to open up to a prescription of where's my authentic self. And I have it separated into 3 different sections, and we go through connecting with the body and all of the conditioned habits that live in the body that, are dysregulating our nervous system. And then the next section is the next layer of the onion that I'm kind of gesturing, peeling back of, is the mind and the ego and the inner child, all those stories. We've been talking about this in the entire conversation, right? All of those old meanings that we're assigning and identities and roles we have to play. And then you enter section 3, which is, now that we have the safety and the awareness and we've started to peel back some of the impact of our conditioning, then now we have the space to begin to explore that deeper, unique, energetic expression, our perspectives, our thoughts, our wants, our creativity. I kind of cited some things earlier, our imagination, all of that unique to usness. That is, in my opinion, what our soul is. So to find our way there, again, it's not a kind of, 3 steps of checking boxes. It's really this process of, kind of removing. And I think what we are then left with not only is our unique expression, it is the awareness that we are infinitely and inherently connected. Whether or not the meaningful connection for any listeners, right, is the natural world around us of which we are a part. We're made of the same elements. We are energetically communicating with all of the energy around us, whether it's, inanimate objects like the humans around us or the animals or the beings or the plant life. Like we are just connected. And for some of us, that's the meaningful kind of more universal connection of our soul. Because again, this all goes back to this idea that when we say we're social interdependent creatures, and right, that's how we kind of have the most harmony, and we can not only survive, we can thrive. I mean, we are actually energetically interdependent with the world around us. And if, it's not nature for you, if it is a, kind of more spiritual entity or being or kind of like religious based, kind of connection, I think that's what joins us, is this idea that I'm not alone individual. I might, have been conditioned to operate as one, disconnected, though when I've peeled back enough layers, I am really face to face with the fact that I am part of something greater. And again, then we can uniquely define what that meaning is for each of us and what are the moments in our life where we can feel most connected, and obviously staying committed to creating with boundaries and all the work we've been talking about, the ability then to drop in. And I think that's, again, when we begin to collectively heal is when we do not only come to the awareness, but come to the action of living in that interconnected state. So many of us feel alone. I know for me, I actually opened the book of, the saying alone in a crowded room. I was living that. Like I said, I had a world around me of, New York and relationships and doing. But at my core, why I felt so disconnected is because I wasn't connected to my soul. Not only was I not being me, I was really cut off from what, again, I think is our inherent connection to all that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful place to leave it. And I can say what you just said at the end there, which is the lack of connection to everything that is so available to connect with because of the lack of connection to soul. For me, that was a huge piece of the puzzle, and one that I would have fought to avoid. But larger topic for another day. Thank you so much. You mentioned that you've got courses, you've got those sorts of things out there. What's available, and if people want to learn more about what you're up to?
Absolutely. And thank you. I really love this conversation, Charlie. And obviously thank everyone for listening. I really, truly mean it when I say that this is how we do our part. And I do think we are energetically connected, and the direction that we are moving toward as a collective is, in my opinion, so inspiring. So I'll start with all of the free accessible resources, because they're always a priority for me, pretty much across any social media platform at this point. There is some presence of the handle Holistic Psychologist, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, where it all began, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or X, whatever we want to call it, all the things. So I like to shout out those. I do have a membership. It's called SelfHealers Circle. We open up for enrollment 3 times a year. For more information, you can check out selfhealerscircle.com. I have books out. They're pretty much...
Take a moment there. So you walk people through some of the exercises and things that they can do. Sell this.
Oh, yes.
I want people to join if they're...
Absolutely. The Circle. So the Circle, again, was born out of this desire. As the community grew on Instagram, I started to hear people who, wanted a bit more, a private. A lot of people were having family members following on social media. Like, I want something away from social media. And I was really starting to explore and experiment with ways to integrate a community-based healing model. I hadn't seen it being done, and virtually really kind of struck out to me. And a lot of the community, was and continues to be global. So for me, it was really experimenting with how to translate. Every month we drop a new course. And so we'll talk about, everything that we've talked about, from, kind of energy, nervous system work, to attachment, inner child, ego. At this point, it's been open since, I think, November 2019, maybe, is when we had our first enrollment. So every month we have a course. So we have a whole course library, not only of kind of concepts, PDF worksheets that you can take and begin. We're always about insight and action. We have at this point now a weekly live event, which means I'm either doing a workshop, or we have someone coming in from the outside in their kind of area of wisdom sharing. We have, community connection workshops, so ways where in real time you can attend live events. We now have built out the technology we house all of this on our private website, I guess you would call it, and we have built in a portal. It looks very much like a social media platform.
Cool.
So every member has their own little, profile page and can interact and put up posts and interact with other members and connect along the way. So it's been I'm having chills when I talk about it. It was born out of an idea, a desire for a more community-based environment, and just watching it evolve, not only in terms of what we've been able to build to make it possible, but really the community continue to evolve. All of the excitement that we continue to have around each and every launch, with members, who have been here, many since the beginning of the membership itself, and just the excitement is just such an inspiring place to be. So it's called SelfHealers Circle. I don't know when this will air, but we're opening up September 1st and then again on January 1st.
Oh, it'll be right around then. Yeah.
Perfect. So if anyone is interested, you can jump
maybe
on
a few
the
days
wait
after,
list.
but it'll be up. It'll be up.
Open enrollment actually will last about a week. We have a wait list only enrollment to avoid kind of the panic and the stress nature and the crashing servers that we've lived through. So any information, selfhealercircle.com. And then of course I have the 3 books, which are available at any retailers except for How to Be the Love You Seek. That is coming out at the end of November, though it is on pre-order.
Cool. Amazing. I love the community aspect. It's another conversation, but I think that's a piece that's been very tough to get right. And how do you use social media to actually foster those connections and not superficial, whatever. But thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.